moments, because I think what's so exciting about music is it is something that unfolds through the process of time. That's what music is. It's something that, if people get it right, then you'll be whipped up into a trance frenzy or a state of prayer. Music is something very special and very emotive, and it's become very disposable.
So you come up with a chord progression, as you say, with King of the Mountain. You get an idea of Elvis in your head, and that's a sort of thematic idea. You work at home, of course, though, don't you? You have the studio, so
yes.
You're able just to get everything down as quickly as possible.
I think what's quite strange is that a lot of the writing process is really quick. I do that very quickly. But then the arrangement of the songs can be incredibly drawn out and long-winded and so frustrating.
Is that because you're a perfectionist in the studio?
I'm very opinionated. I'm horrible to work with. I'm so fussy and picky, and I think what's good is that I know what I want, and I think actually that's the most important thing.
You know what you want in your head before
yes.
you... Oh, so you actually you would have heard the whole song, the finished song in your head then?
Well, I have a sense of the direction to go in, which is really important, because I think it's when you don't know what you want that you're in trouble.
When you get to the studio, and I mean, you don't have to get to the studio, you're working at home, in effect. That must help the process, I presume, doesn't it?
It's very important for me, because now I have a child. I wouldn't have been able to work at all if I hadn't have been able to work at home. It's also... it helps me to get a very good creative focus, because one of the things that's very difficult is the distractions that come into what should be a very quiet, focused process.
Here comes the sunshine, here comes the sun of mine, here comes everything, here's a song and a song for him, sweet kisses.
Because you said in the past, I think many years ago, you said you couldn't imagine having a child and having a career in music. Was that difficult then, was there a matter of balance? Was it dividing your time? And
what was difficult was trying to fit the album in around bringing up a child, because I didn't want anything to interfere with that process. Yeah, I wanted to give as much time as I possibly could to my son. I love being with him. He's a lovely little boy, and he won't be little for very long. I felt that my work could wait, really, whereas his growing up process couldn't.
to me, the album has a more sparse and spacious quality to the last work. I mean, the Red Shoes 13 years ago, but before that, The Sensual World, both very, very rich sound, layer upon layer. Was there a conscious attempt to make something that was possibly simpler musically?
Very much so. I've always tried to be adventurous, and I think one of my faults is that I have a tendency to overdo things. And what was good about taking a gap after the last record was I had a chance to actually sit back and think about what were the things that I felt that I kept getting wrong that I wanted to try and sort out. Because one of the common problems with human beings generally is you tend to keep making the same mistakes again and again. I wanted to make a record that had much more space in it. And I also wanted to stand in the role of narrator much more, rather than it being the person inside the song. I wanted to stand outside and talk about situations outside of myself. Part of that process was also to not have very many backing vocals, to have a greater sense of one voice telling a story.
Did you have the idea of the themes? I mean, you say there's two distinct records, both driven by a narrator. But did you have the idea of the sea and the sky? Was that always going to be the dual theme?
No. In fact, it was more a sense of single songs that would be each one would be about a person. And then this idea of some kind of conceptual piece was something that just gradually started to evolve.
I remember it was that Wednesday. Oh, when it rained and it rained. It drapes mud all over the house. It took hours and hours to scrub it out. All over the whole carpet. I took my mop and my bucket and I cleaned the kitchen floor until
There are individual characters that emerge over the course of the album. You're the narrator. I mean, Mrs. Bartolozzi, and this is a woman, I presume this is the name of the woman who you are describing, cleaning the house almost obsessively, piling the clothes into the washing machine, watching them tumble round. There's a beautiful idea of the woman's shirt and the man's trousers intertwining. That was about somebody else then, was it, rather than you at home, living the domestic life?
Well, I do a lot of washing. I'm sure I would never have written the song if I didn't. You know, just this woman in her house with her washing, and then the idea of taking the water in the washing machine with all the clothes and the water then becoming the sea, and I also think there's something very interesting about clothes. They're kind of people without the people in them, if you know what I mean. They all have our scent and pieces of us on them somehow.
washing machine. Washing machine.
And several of the songs, during the lyrics, one idea sparks off another. And so when the woman's looking at the washing machine and the clothes spinning round, suddenly she's thinking about the sea. And it happens elsewhere in A Coral Room, when the idea is you're on a boat looking down into the water underneath, and there's almost a lost city under there, with all the fishermen's nets, like spiders' webs, and beautiful imagery. But then suddenly, with the hand trailing in the water, it's the idea of an old jug in your mind, which belonged to your mother. Your mother did have that jug, did she? Am I reading too much into it?
No, it's fantastic.
There were hundreds of people living here, sails at the windows, and the planes came crashing down. And many a pilot drowned, and the speedboats flying above. Put your hand over the side of the boat, and what do you feel?
There was a little brown jug, actually, yeah. The song is really about the passing of time.
My mother.
I like the idea of coming from this big, expansive, outside world of sea and cities into, again, this very small space where it's talking about a memory of my mother and this little brown jug. I always remember hearing years ago this thing about a sort of Zen approach to life, where you would hold something in your hand, knowing that at some point it would break, it would no longer be there.
And now it holds our memories. I can hear her singing. Little brown jug, don't I love thee? Little brown jug, don't I love thee? Ho, ho, ho.
You have so many times in the past in songs sung almost as a child. And you've sung about your parents, your father's appeared on your records. The last record was dedicated to your mother. I mean, and people have talked about the childlike quality of your voice. Is this a record that is made by a mother rather than a child?
Yes, I think it probably is.
I mean, has the process of motherhood bringing up a son, that has changed the way that you compose and write and perform, do you think?
Yes, I think it has. And I think also, as well as being a mother, when you lose your mother, you're no longer a little girl anymore. And so I've had a lot of things that have changed me over the years, from the last album to this.
Yeah, I think on the last record there's some of the songs heartbreakingly sad.